Speaker, let me talk about an issue. First of all, let me say that we have, the leader has announced a number of bills for consideration next week. I venture to say that an extraordinarily infinitesimal amount of the American people have any ideas what those bills do or are urging those bills to be passed. I do not mean they are without substance. I mean that they are not the issues on the mind of the American people. This is the people's house. The Speaker, Mr. Speaker, appeared on television on a town hall on CNN some 14 months ago. He made a promise at a CNN town hall to a dreamer that asked him a question. House Speaker Paul Ryan strongly suggested to that young woman that, and I quote, revocation on protection for the dreamers brought here as children will not be carried out. Notwithstanding that, the President of the United States put that dreamer and hundreds of thousands of other dreamers, indeed close to 2 million dreamers, at risk by withdrawing their protections, which Speaker Ryan indicated would not happen. Quote, will not be carried out. That was some 6 months ago, Mr. Speaker. Not the CNN, that was 14 months ago. I have talked to the Speaker, and I have brought it up continuously on this floor. And I've been told by the Republican leadership, don't worry, we've got until March 5th to do something. I was told that in October. I was told it in November. I was told it in December. I was told it in January. I was told it in February. Don't worry, we've got until March 5th. March 5th came and went. No action. None. That dreamer to whom the Speaker spoke is still at risk, still worried, still twisting in the wind. 86% of the American public, Mr. Speaker, says that young woman should not be kicked out of the country that she knows. Brought here as a child, went to elementary school, middle school, high school, some to college, some practicing medicine, some practicing law, some being social workers, many being teachers. I was told, don't worry. They were told, don't worry. March 5th is a long way away. It has come and gone. And we're told this week we will consider H.R. 1116, the Taylor Act. I'm not sure any of my constituents have talked to me about the Taylor Act. H.R. 4263, Regulation A+ Improvement Act. I doubt that a single one of my constituents has talked to me about that act. They are fillers, Mr. Speaker. They are fillers while we fiddle, while Rome burns. I have asked, Leader Pelosi has asked, frankly, leaders of the Catholic Church and other denominations have asked, put the Dreamer bill on the floor in the people's house. The Speaker of this House, when he became Speaker, said, we will not duck the tough issues. We will take them head on. Don't worry. We got till March 5th. March 5th is behind us. And we consider these bills, which I think are filler bills, and controversial bills at that. We have asked, Mr. Speaker, that the majority party put on the floor 3 bills on an issue of vital importance to the American people, that every American knows about, that the People's House ought to have the right to speak on and express the views of the American people and establish policy they support. 86% of them. So I would again ask the Majority Leader, Mr. Speaker, to put the DREAM Act on the floor, to put Mr. Goodlatte's bill on the floor, to put the bipartisan bill sponsored by Mr. Hurd of Texas and Mr. Aguilar of California. Put them on the floor. Take the issues. I know they're tough. The Speaker said you want to take the issues head on, Mr. Speaker, not duck. Show some political courage. And not only that, respect this institution and every member in it who wants to express their opinion on this legislation of critical importance to at least 1.8 million Americans. Vital to their future, to their life. And 86% of Americans believe they ought to be protected, just as Speaker Ryan pledged they would be 14 months ago when he said revocation of protection for the dreamers brought here as children will not be carried out. Mr. Speaker, that bill ought to be brought to the floor to carry out that representation and that assurance. I've been patient. I've talked. I've worked. I've come to meetings. I met with the President of the United States, Mr. Speaker, with my colleague and friend, the Majority Leader, and Mr. Durbin, and others. 25 of us sitting around the cabinet table, Mr. Speaker, when the President said, we'll take care of DACA. And he said, you send me a bill, I'll sign it, and I'll take the heat. He was not telling the truth, Mr. Speaker, because we had a bill called the Common Sense Crowd. About 25 United States senators brought a bill to the floor, and a couple of the things the President wanted to take care of. But it wasn't good enough for him. Notwithstanding the fact, he said, you send me a bill, you decide, i.e. the Congress, the co-equal branch of government, who now stands suppliant in the face of saying, we'll pass something only if the President will sign it. That's not what the framers meant, Mr. Speaker. We are a co-equal branch, not a subservient branch of the Congress of the United States or the government of the United States. Mr. Speaker, if we brought those 3 bills to the floor that I just referred to, the DREAM Act, co-sponsored by Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, a Republican, and Lucille Roybal Allard, a Democrat, and the Goodlatte bill to the floor, sponsored by the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and a bipartisan bill sponsored by many Republicans and many Democrats, the Hurd, a Republican from Texas, and Mr. Aguilar, a Democrat from California. If we brought those bills to the floor, the problem is they know the Hurd-Aguilar bill would pass, which would reflect the views of 86% of the American people. No, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the fact that American people are overwhelmingly for that, we're going to be considering H.R. 1116, H.R. 4545, H.R. 4263. Ignoring that 1.8 million people, ignoring that promise that the Speaker made to that young woman that she would be protected. Speakers told me over and over again, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I'm going to have some task force, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. March 5th has come and gone. Nothing's happened. I used to be the Majority Leader. I could bring a bill to the floor. If I said something was going to happen, I tried to make sure it happened. If I sound angry, it is because I am angry. If I sound frustrated, it is because I am frustrated. The People's House ought to be given the opportunity to express the will of the American people on this issue. There's another issue, and we do have a bill, the so-called Rutherford bill, that we're bringing to the floor on suspension. We're probably all going to vote for the Rutherford bill.
Thank you.
But we're going to ignore a bill, as we've been ignoring for years under Republican leadership, a bill that is even supported even more than the DACA, Dreamer bills. And that is comprehensive background checks, which clearly will save lives, which will close the loopholes, which will make sure that those with criminal records don't get guns, make sure that those with mental health issues don't get guns, will make sure that terrorists who can't fly on airplanes can't get guns. Mr. Speaker, we have been urging and pleading for that bill to be brought to the floor over and over and over again. The National Rifle Association is not for that bill. I can't understand why. Rather, we bring a bill to the floor that will help schools. I think that's positive. Do what they can do right now. Should we help them? Of course. But we ought not to pretend that we are doing something to make our children safer in their schools, to make concert goers safer at their concerts, to make churchgoers safer in their church, to make people who go to a nightclub safer in that nightclub, to make people who go to shopping centers safer in those shops. We ought not to pretend that the Rutherford bill is going to do that. Will comprehensive background checks do it all? It will not. There are other things I think ought to be done. But at minimum, the American people think that we ought to make sure that everybody who purchases a weapon has a background check to make sure that they're not a criminal, somebody with a substantial mental health problem that makes them unsafe to own a gun. Spousal abusers. Mr. Speaker, the bills we're going to consider next week, I'm sure have some merit from some perception, from somebody's perception. But the two bills that I've just discussed are on the minds of the American people. And millions are at risk if we do not pass legislation dealing with that issue. I do not criticize the Rutherford bill, but it will not solve the problem, and everybody knows it will not solve the problem. Nor, frankly, will universal background checks in and of itself solve the problems. But experts say it will save thousands of lives over time. It would have saved lives in Charleston, South Carolina. 9 people killed in Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Mr. Speaker, I like to work in a bipartisan way. But that requires respecting one another. My Republican friends wrote a book in which they were very critical of the way we ran the House because it wasn't open and transparent. I would ask them to reread that book. I've read it. My friend is smiling. In that book, they really wanted to change the way this House runs, make it open, transparent, take the tough issues head on. That's what the Speaker said. Mr. Speaker, they're not taking the tough issues head on. They're hiding from the NRA. They're hiding from some of their hard-line people who want to kick people out of America, that want to take that lamp that the Statue of Liberty holds high and bring it down. Yes, I'm disappointed. Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I'm frustrated. I came to this body to express my opinion on the important issues confronting my country and trying to make it better. So, Mr. Speaker, I would plead with the Majority Leader to perhaps delay those 4 bills. Rutherford's going to be on suspension, won't take much time. Delay those 3 bills that a minuscule amount of Americans, there may be 100, there may be 200 Americans who will be concerned those bills aren't brought forward, and put on the floor the 3 bills I referred to, the DREAM Act, the Goodlatte bill, and the Hurd-Aguilar bill, and let the People's House express its opinion. That is not an unfair request. And let the background check, universal background check bill come to the floor. And let the House vote. I know that there's some Republicans don't want to vote on that bill because the public is so overwhelmingly for it, and they may upset the NRA. That's what this business is about, Mr. Speaker. Expressing openly and clearly what we think the policies of our country ought to be to make our public better, to make our country safer. So I would end on those 2 issues and yield to my friend, the Majority Leader.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the President